The diner was loud in the way only cheap, late-night places could be. Cutlery clinking against chipped plates, the low hum of tired conversations, a crying baby somewhere near the back. She moved through it all like a ghost in a stained apron, her smile automatic, her feet aching inside shoes that had long ago lost their cushioning. Every "How can I help you tonight?" sounded the same, even to her own ears. Polite, light, empty. It had been a double shift, again. Rent was 3 days late. Her landlord had stopped being patient 2 months ago. The electricity bill sat folded in her locker, bright red letters screaming final notice. She hadn't opened it since yesterday morning, as if ignoring it might buy her more time. Her phone buzzed in her pocket every hour with messages from numbers she didn't recognize. Debt reminders, payment warnings, offers for loans she knew she'd never qualify for. "Miss? Excuse me?" a customer snapped, waving an empty coffee mug at her like she'd committed a personal offense. She hurried over, apologizing, topping off his cup while he muttered about service these days. She nodded, smiled, said sorry again. She was always sorry. Sorry for the wait, sorry for the mistake, sorry for existing in someone's line of sight at the wrong moment. By the time her break came, it was already 10 minutes late. She leaned against the counter near the register, hands trembling slightly from too much caffeine and not enough food. She had skipped lunch to save money, telling herself she wasn't that hungry anyway. Her reflection in the pie display glass startled her. Dark circles, pale lips, eyes that looked older than 26. 2 waitresses at the end of the counter were whispering about weekend plans, movies, dates, a road trip. She tried to remember the last time she'd gone anywhere that wasn't work, the grocery store, or home to her tiny apartment with peeling wallpaper and a heater that rattled all night. The silence in that apartment was the worst part. No one to talk to, no one to help. Just bills and thoughts she couldn't turn off. Her manager's voice cut through the noise. "Table 7's been waiting. You okay or what?" She nodded quickly, pushing off the counter. "Yeah, I'm fine." But she wasn't, and something inside her finally cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet snap like a thread pulled too tight for too long. She walked to table 7, took the order, wrote it down wrong, had to ask again. Her cheeks burned. The couple sitting there exchanged a look, pity mixed with annoyance. That one tiny silent judgment. She turned away from the table, stared at the floor tiles for one long second, and then the words slipped out before she could stop them, barely louder than a breath, but heavy with everything she'd been holding in. "I swear," she muttered, voice shaking, "I just need a husband by tomorrow, or I'm not going to make it." She didn't mean it the way it sounded. She meant help, stability, someone to split the weight of living with. But the sentence hung in the air anyway, raw, desperate, and far too honest for a place that only wanted smiles and refills. She had mastered the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. Customers never noticed. To them, she was just the friendly waitress with quick hands and a soft voice, the one who remembered who wanted extra lemon and who liked their fries crispy. They saw efficiency, politeness, maybe even cheerfulness on a good day. What they didn't see was how carefully constructed that expression was, like makeup painted over a bruise. Every morning, she stood in front of her tidy bathroom mirror, fluorescent light flickering overhead, and practiced looking fine. Shoulders back, chin up, lips curved just enough. If she looked tired, people asked questions. If she looked sad, they tipped less. So she learned to look pleasant no matter how little she'd slept or how heavy her chest felt. Sleep had become a luxury. Most nights she lay awake in her narrow bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, her mind running numbers over and over. Rent, utilities, credit card minimums, groceries. The figures never added up, no matter how many times she rearranged them in her head. Around 3 a.m., anxiety would settle over her like a weight, pressing down so hard she had to sit up just to breathe properly. Still, when her alarm rang at 6, she got up. She always got up. Called in sick once last year and spent the whole day panicking about the lost tips. At work, she moved fast, because moving fast meant not thinking. Refill coffee, clear plates. Smile, joke about needing coffee more than the customers did. She played the role so well that even her co-workers believed it. "You're always so positive," one of them had said last week. If only she knew. Behind that easy laugh was a constant hum of fear. Fear that one unexpected expense, a broken appliance, a medical bill, would knock everything over like a line of dominoes. Fear that she was falling behind in life while everyone else seemed to be moving forward. Engagements, promotions, vacations she only ever heard about while pouring more iced tea. Loneliness made everything louder. After work, she went home to silence so thick it almost rang in her ears. No one asked how her day was. No one noticed if she cried in the shower to keep the sound from echoing in the empty apartment. Some nights she left the TV on just to feel like another voice existed in the room. She missed being cared for, not in a dramatic movie-style way, just small things. Someone noticing she looked tired, someone bringing her a glass of water without being asked, someone to share the mental load of life with. Instead, she carried it all alone. Every appointment, every bill, every worry tucked neatly behind that customer service smile. By the time she tied on her apron each shift, the performance had already begun. "Hi, welcome in," she'd say brightly, as if her heart wasn't exhausted from holding back tears she didn't even have time to shed. He hadn't meant to listen. He was just trying to get his daughter to finish her grilled cheese before it went cold. She sat across from him in the vinyl booth, swinging her sneakers against the seat, humming to herself while carefully peeling the crust off her sandwich. He watched her with the quiet attentiveness of a parent who had learned the hard way how fast life could change. A juice box sat by her elbow, already half empty, and a smear of ketchup decorated her cheek like war paint. He reached over with a napkin. "Hold still, Bug," he said gently, wiping her face. She giggled and leaned into his hand for a second longer than necessary, the way she always did when she wanted extra affection without asking for it out loud. He understood that language. Kids who had lost one parent early learned to ask for love in sideways ways. The waitress had been taking care of them all evening. He'd noticed how patient she was with his daughter, how she didn't rush them even when the diner got busier. She brought extra napkins without being asked, refilled his coffee before it ran dry, and called his daughter sweetheart in a voice that sounded kind, not forced. But he'd also noticed the small things most people missed. The way her smile dropped the second she turned away from a table, the faint tremor in her hands when she set down plates, the way her eyes looked distant sometimes, like her mind was somewhere far from the clatter of dishes and low conversations. Single parenthood had sharpened his ability to read people. When you were your child's whole world, you learned to scan rooms, moods, tones. You learned to recognize when someone was barely holding it together, because you'd had days like that too. So when she walked past their booth after taking another table's order, he wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the diner noise dipped just enough, and her voice, low and shaky, slipped through the air. "I just need a husband by tomorrow, or I'm not going to make it." The words weren't loud, but they landed heavy. He looked up. She was facing away, shoulders tight, one hand pressed flat against the order pad like she needed something solid to keep her upright. It didn't sound like a joke. There was no playful tone, no eye roll, just exhaustion wrapped in humor so thin it was almost transparent. His chest tightened in a way he couldn't quite explain. Not pity, not exactly. Recognition. He remembered nights at his kitchen table after his wife passed, bills spread out in front of him, wondering how one person was supposed to carry the weight of two lives. He remembered putting on a brave face at work, cracking jokes so no one would ask why his eyes looked tired all the time. He glanced at his daughter, blissfully focused on dipping fries in ketchup, then back at the waitress, who had already squared her shoulders and turned back toward the dining room, her customer smile sliding into place like armor. Most people had heard nothing. He had heard everything. He could have looked away. That would have been the easy thing, the normal thing. People heard uncomfortable truths every day and pretended they hadn't. It was a quiet social agreement. Don't get involved, don't make it awkward, don't step into someone else's mess. For a moment, he almost followed that rule. He stirred his coffee even though he didn't take sugar, eyes fixed on the dark swirl in the cup. His brain offered practical excuses. Maybe she was joking. Maybe she didn't want anyone to notice. Maybe stepping in would embarrass her more than help. But then his daughter kicked his shin lightly under the table. "Daddy," she whispered, leaning closer, "the lady looks sad." Kids didn't overthink things. They saw, they felt, they said it. He glanced up again. The waitress was at the counter now, punching in an order, shoulders still a little hunched, movements slightly too fast. Her smile flashed at a customer, then vanished the second she turned away. "I just think she's tired," he told her daughter softly. "Like you get?" she asked. He smiled a little. "Yeah, like I get." That settled it. He couldn't ignore it, not when he knew exactly what that kind of tired felt like, the kind that sleep didn't fix. When she came back to their table with the check, her voice was steady again. "No rush at all," she said, placing it down. "Whenever you're ready." He looked up at her, not with the quick, distracted glance of a customer, but fully, the way you look at a person when you actually see them. "Hey," he said gently, keeping his tone low so it didn't carry. "I couldn't help overhearing earlier." Her smile faltered instantly. Color rushed to her cheeks. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean. I was just talking to myself. You don't have to explain," he quickly said, shaking his head. "I'm not judging, not even a little." She blinked, clearly bracing for a joke or lecture that didn't come. "I've had days like that," he continued, "the kind where everything feels one bill away from falling apart. Okay, maybe more than a few." Something in her posture shifted. Not relaxed exactly, but less defensive. "It's just a lot," she admitted quietly. "Sorry, that was unprofessional." It was human, there's a difference. For the first time, her smile came back slower, softer, like it hadn't been pulled from a script. His daughter popped up on her knees in the booth. "Daddy makes pancakes when he's sad," she announced helpfully. "It helps." He laughed under his breath. "She means I try." The waitress let out a small, surprised laugh of her own, the sound fragile but real. And just like that, the moment stopped being about embarrassment. It became two tired adults standing in the same small pocket of honesty, choosing kindness instead of pretending not to see. She didn't know why she stayed at their table longer than necessary. Maybe it was because they weren't looking at her the way people usually did when she slipped, when her mask cracked. There was no smirk, no pitying tilt of the head, no awkward rush to change the subject. Just space, space to breathe. "I shouldn't dump that on strangers," she said, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Long day."
"Long year?" he offered gently. That earned a small, tired smile. "Yeah, that too." His daughter, still kneeling on the seat, studied her with wide, curious eyes. "Are you a mommy?" The question hit her like a soft punch to the chest. "No," she said, voice warm but quiet. "Just me." The little girl nodded solemnly, as if filing that information away. "It's just me and Daddy," she said proudly. "Mommy lives in the sky." He reached up and smoothed a hand over his daughter's hair, his expression calm but edged with something deeper. "She means her mom passed away," he explained softly. "I'm so sorry," the waitress said immediately, and she meant it. The words didn't feel automatic the way apologies to customers did. They felt heavy, respectful. He gave a small nod. "Thank you. It's been a few years." He hesitated, then added, "You learned to carry things you didn't think you could." She understood that sentence in her bones. "I guess we're both good at carrying too much," she said. "Looks like it," he replied. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The diner noise swelled around them, laughter from a group near the window, the hiss of the grill, a blender whirring behind the counter. But at their table, the air felt oddly still, like the world had stepped back a few feet. "I didn't mean what I said literally," she admitted, eyes dropping to the check in her hand, "about needing a husband. I just meant help, someone to split life with, you know? Rent, stress, all of it. It gets heavy alone." "I know," he said. No dramatic speech, no exaggerated sympathy, just two words, steady and sure. He told her, briefly, about learning to braid hair from online videos, about packing school lunches at 6 a.m. before heading for work, about sitting at the kitchen table after his daughter fell asleep, wondering if he was doing any of it right. Not complaining, just sharing. She found herself laughing softly when he described his first disastrous attempt at pigtails. He noticed the way her face changed when she laughed, how the exhaustion didn't disappear, but it loosened its grip. They weren't trying to impress each other, they weren't flirting, they were just two people comparing invisible bruises, surprised to find someone who recognized the same shade of ache. By the time she stepped back from the table, something inside her felt a fraction lighter. Nothing in her life had changed. The bills were still waiting, her shift wasn't over, but for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was the only person in the world barely holding it together. She went back to work, but the night didn't feel quite as heavy as it had an hour ago. The plates were still hot in her hands, the orders still came too fast, and her feet still ached with every step. But something small and steady had settled in her chest. Not joy, not relief, just a thin thread of warmth where there had only been pressure before. Every time she passed their booth, she caught a glimpse of them. His daughter now coloring on a paper plat mat with a crayon he'd pulled from his jacket pocket, him pretending not to notice when she drew a lopsided heart and pushed it toward him with a proud grin. He made a big show of admiring it, pressing his hand to his chest like it was the greatest artwork he'd ever seen. It did something to her, watching that. A quiet reminder that gentleness still existed, even in people who had been through loss. When their plates were cleared and the check was paid, she expected that to be the end of it, a kind conversation, a shared moment, and then they'd disappear back into their lives like all customers did. But he didn't stand right away. Instead, he pulled a pen from his shirt pocket and wrote something on the back of the receipt. He hesitated, like he was debating himself, then folded it once and held it out to her. "No pressure," he said, meeting her eyes. "But if you ever want to talk to someone who understands one bill away from disaster energy, I'm a pretty good listener." Her first instinct was to refuse out of habit. Don't be unprofessional, don't blur lines, don't hope for things that fall apart. But his expression wasn't pushy. It was open, careful, the way you hold out a hand to a scared animal, ready to pull back if it startles. She took the paper. "Thank you," she said softly. His daughter waved both hands at her. "Bye, pancake lady." She blinked, then laughed. "Bye, sweetheart." They left, the bell over the diner door jingling as it closed behind them. She stood there a second longer than necessary, receipt still in her hand, heart beating in a way she hadn't felt in a long time, nervous but not in a bad way. Later on her break, she unfolded the paper in the staff hallway. A name, a phone number, and underneath it, for coffee or pancakes, bad hair braiding advice included. She smiled down at it, a real smile, the kind that made her eyes sting a little. Nothing in her life had magically fixed itself. Her rent was still late. Tomorrow would still come with the same responsibilities. But now, when she pictured tomorrow, it didn't look like an endless gray stretch she had to survive alone. It looked like the possibility of sitting across from someone who understood, while a little girl colored at the table and the world for an hour felt kinder than usual. And somehow, that was enough to help her make it through the night.